I'm glad you're not slumping, though. I'm glad you're here. How about that, huh? Take your Bible if you want to follow in that, but you do have the notes of Proverbs 24. And one thing that I want to clue you in on, is this too loud or is it okay? A little bit quieter, or are we all right? Frank, you got your hearing aids in? No. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Proverbs 24. One of the things my goal is I want to finish up a study of Proverbs. I began it probably 3 years ago, and then I would take a break, then I would come back, and Lord willing, we will finish this up over the summer. I had thought about taking a break again, but I want to, I've written a lot of devotionals. If you go to my website, you can see a lot of devotionals on the book of Proverbs. And my ultimate goal is that I want to turn this into a daily devotional study for fathers with their children. And so taking a lot of this, some things will be above some kids' thoughts or understanding, but there's a whole lot that is very practical. And quite honestly, we live in a day of lack of common sense. Would you agree? I was just listening to a hearing in Washington, D.C., and someone was being interviewed by one of the House of Representatives, and this individual is supposed to be an expert on human sexuality. And so the question was asked, do you believe that a man can be pregnant? And if you do you also believe that man should have a right to an abortion? Well, without even blinking, her answer was, yes, I do believe that men can be pregnant and that they should have the right to abortion. Now, obviously what she's talking about is someone who is a female that is self-proclaimed or identifying herself, itself as a woman. And I'm just sitting there watching this lunacy. I just like, she's straight-faced answering this, you know. But the lunacy out there. So I want to just continue to encourage us. I think the Bible is the most practical, truthful, honest, and common sense. You know, if you think and look at the world really through the eyes of just simply accepting truth as truth, then you don't end up with a lot of lunacy. When you reject the Bible, you end up with insanity. And I do really think that some of these people are genuinely certified mentally ill. Now, I don't believe in mental illness in that sense. I believe in a heart problem, you know. And there's an awful lot today that used to be diagnosed mental illness, and it was really a heart problem. Well, now we've gone to mental illness, has become accepted, and it's the ordinary. And so who are the insane ones? The ones that think that God created male and female, and in the beginning created he, them, you know. And so we're living in a crazy day. But here's where we are. We're at Proverbs 24, 17 through 34. And you've already been able to tell when I go through this, I try to do it in such a way that I can take a proverb and basically sum it up with just a simple point, a simple statement. So here's my first one on your outline there, and it is this: love your enemy, but don't envy him. Love your enemy, but don't envy him. I got a phone call from someone, I'm not allowed or desiring to mention who, but not a member of the church, but just under a lot of attacks, and the individual said, Pastor, it's hard to love an enemy like that. And so we talked about loving the enemy, but at the same time, not envying that enemy. Let me walk you through this, and then we'll break it down into some things underneath that. All right, here we go. Proverbs 24, verse 17. Rejoice not, and you can see my amplification of that. Do not cheer, do not be glad when thy enemy falleth, when he's cast down, when he's overthrown. Let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth. Now we're going to ask the question, why? And we'll keep reading. Continuing then. Verse 18, lest the Lord see it and it displeased him, and he turned away his wrath from him. Let's break it down. Let me go through it a little bit. Here's my thought for you. I should have gone to that. I apologize. So, rejoice not when thy enemy falleth. Let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth, lest the Lord see it, and it displease him, and he shall turn away his wrath from him. Then continuing, 19 and 20. Fret not thyself of evil men, neither be thou envious at the wicked, for there shall be no reward to the evil man. The candle of the wicked, the light of the wicked shall be put out. So here we go. Let me break it down into a couple of thoughts. The first one is this: don't gloat. Don't gloat. All right, let's go back. Read. Rejoice not, and rejoice not when thine enemy falleth. Now, here's the question. As a nation, we have a history, like all nations do. When you win a great victory over an enemy, you celebrate, right? I think the end of World War II, the ticker tape parade down in New York, and celebrations all over. Even today, when someone is a hero, we pin them with honors. You know, we recognize them. So we understand in a national sense that there is always that celebration. But yet, look at this here. We're not to rejoice over the suffering of an enemy. Now here's the question. Why should we not gloat when an adversary falls? Why should we not gloat when an adversary falls? Now the answer is in the next verse, in verse 20. Lest the Lord see it, and it displease him. Displease him for what reason? That I'm gloating over the fall, the failure, the struggles, the sorrows, the hurt of my enemy. But then it says, and the Lord turn away his wrath from him. So I don't gloat over my enemy's sorrows, my enemy's hurt. But if I do, the Lord might say, okay, child, I'm going to take away all that he's going through right now because of his sin and his wickedness. I'm just going to take that away and let him prosper, right? So don't gloat. Here's some thoughts that go with that, and I wanted to put it for you in this way. I think Proverbs 24:17 through 18 demands an attitude checkup. Now, first of all, let's talk about who is your adversary. Now, I don't need their names. But who would an adversary be? Could be a coworker.
Family member.
Family. In essence, an enemy is someone that has hurt you, right? Or they've hurt someone you love. They may have disparaged your testimony, your reputation. That individual has set themselves as an enemy. Now, going back, rejoice not. Then I wanted to take you to what the Lord taught on this matter, and I think I skipped it, didn't I? Here we go. You have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. That's the normal mindset. That's the attitude out there, right? You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you worse, right? That's the world and the mindset. And yet the Lord taught his disciples, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And so it's exactly the opposite of what the urge within me is. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. You hurt someone I love, I want to hurt you. I want to make you feel my pain. Would you agree? That's the way it is. That's the way it is in the world, all right? But now we've got this commandment of loving our enemies. How do you love somebody that wants to destroy you? How do you love somebody that wants to hurt you in such a way that you cannot escape the consequences of their actions? When we were building this building, and after putting up with this contractor who was a thief and a criminal and a liar, we finally went through all the legal ways you got to go through with the lawyers to terminate this guy. Well, he had, I think it was 30 days to correct what the problems were. Well, there was no way he was going to correct it because he's almost a year behind. And so what did he do that last week? Instead of trying to correct things, you know what he did? He hired day laborers who had never set foot on this job site here, and he paid them the whole week to picket in front of our church that we preach the truth, which I like that was good, but we don't pay our workers. Now, we were already $3.5 million in his pocket, and we had a shell of a building. I mean, we didn't have windows, we didn't have doors, and we were always, it was so frustrating because the bank kept paying them when we kept saying, but they aren't doing the job. You know, Steve was here during that time. Went through all that craziness there. But I'm on the way back on a trip. I think I was going through Virginia or somewhere. And I get this phone call, Pastor, there's picketers in front of the church. I said, what do you mean there's picketers in front of the church? I'm telling you, they're marching up and down the sidewalk with signs. And so here we are, this extraordinary sacrifice to try to be here. And my enemy was doing everything he could to destroy our reputation. Now, was I angered? Yes. But I refused interviews. I wouldn't interview with the television, the station. They wanted to come out. I wouldn't interview with the newspapers because I didn't trust them. And I just had to bite my lip. I had to bite my lip and just wait. Why? Because vengeance belongs to the Lord. Let me walk you through some thoughts with this. Romans 17. And I wanted to give you, I think it's 4 thoughts that go with this. This whole thing, why should I love my enemy? Why should I step back and let God deal with an enemy? Let me walk you through. The first is this. We should be noble, but not seek revenge. Here we go. Let me read it to you. Recompense, repay to no man. Evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men. So as a believer, I should be noble in my response. I shouldn't sink down to the level of my enemy. Then the second thought that goes with that, I should also, verse 18, pursue peace. As much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. So as a believer, I'm not interested in trouble and turmoil. And yeah, I've known people that live with that. I mean, that's just their whole passion. They love to stir up a problem. Well, our desire should be what? To live peaceably. Now here's a question. Is it always possible to live peaceably with men? No, it's not possible. But the longing of our heart should be that we want to seek peace. Thirdly on this, verse 19, leave revenge to God. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. I'll put it to you in another way. Get out of the way and let God deal with them. You know, I've learned in life if I'm willing to allow enough time to go by, God will deal with an enemy. And I don't rejoice when they sorrow. It's not my heart's desire. But God will deal with an enemy. Another thought, verse 20 and 21. And here's the fourth way. Overwhelm your enemy with compassion. Overwhelm your enemy with compassion. Have you ever gone out of your way to love somebody that was your enemy? That really hurt you? But when you knew that they were going through a bad time, you rose up from your hurts and you chose to love them. That's compassion. Let's look at this verse, 20 and 21. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Now, I don't mean that in a gloating manner. Remember, the point of this is don't gloat, right? So I'm just going to show them. I'm just going to make them miserable. Well, that really is the drive. They might be miserable because you're short on compassion, but your desire should not be to gloat over them. And then finally, verse 21, be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, those are pretty easy, aren't they? So if you're a father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, what do you tell a child that's having a fight with a neighbor, what do you tell that child? You tell them what? Don't act like them. We should be noble. Why should I be noble? Because I'm a child of the King. They should see in my response the heart of the Lord. And so, don't return evil for evil. Let me get to a third thought then. On your outline again. Don't allow the sinful ways of the wicked to provoke or overwhelm you. Now, verse 19, fret not thyself because of evil doers, or because of evil men. Neither be thou envious at the wicked. So you have two commands in there. What's the first one? Fret not. And the second one is don't envy. Don't envy. All right, now, fret not. And I think I broke it out for you on here. Do not become angry or burn with jealousy because of evil men. Neither be thou envious at the wicked. Do the wicked sometimes seem like they prosper? Yes. They sin and they get away with it. They actually get the promotion at work because they've been courting the favor of the boss, and yet they're a thieving, lying skunk, and you just wish you could tell somebody they're a thieving, lying skunk, but you can't tell them they're a thieving, lying skunk. Now, here's the thought: fret not. Do we live in a world today that there's a lot to fret about? All right. If we look at Washington, D.C. and all the insanity that goes on up there, could we fret? Yeah, we could. But we're not to fret. We're not to worry. We're not to be overcome with anxiety. So we're not to fret because of evildoers, but we're also not to envy them. Why would I envy them? Because they seem like they're always getting ahead. They're always coming out better than I. And I'm going to go to the fourth thought then. Look past offenses. Look past offenses. Let's look at that. For there shall be no reward to the evil man. Well, it sure looks like they're being rewarded. They're prospering and I'm not. Yeah, but you know what? Here's what I've learned in life. Sometimes the people that are prospering are miserable. They're not happy. The more they get, the more unhappy they become. Because things don't satisfy. Trophies don't satisfy. I think about, what was her name? Naomi Judd, I don't know if she was country. Is that what she was? Country music singer. And she took her life the very next day. She was supposed to be entering into some hall of fame and this great award. But she was miserable. By her own testimony, she had spent most of her life living in depression and suicidal. And yet from the outward part, you would look and say, man, she had everything, right? How can you have everything and be so miserable? So we don't need to fret, but we also need to realize that the candle of the wicked shall be put out. We have to accept that. There will be an end to the ways of wicked men. There will be a day of judgment. A couple other thoughts that go with this. You may not realize that Psalm 37 verses 1 and 2, where did Solomon get this fret not? Well, he got it from his dad. Psalm 37 and verse 1 and 2, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall be cut down like the grass, wither as the green herb. So that was David. So the wisdom of David, now we find Solomon mouthing the same thing. He's repeating the same thing. And then I want to give you one other example, and that is Moses. Let me walk you through Moses just for a moment. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Being the son of Pharaoh's daughter, he had everything, right? I mean, the best education, the finest robes. He was a man of prominence in the world in his day. Verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the repayment of the reward. And then I love this as I looked at verse 27 today. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. I don't know that I've ever preached on verse 27. By faith he forsook Egypt. I preached on that. But the fact that he didn't fear the wrath of the king. And I thought, man, that is, as you look at this passage of Scripture here, again, rejoice not when thy enemy falleth, when he stumbleth. Going on to the other verse, fret not thyself because of evildoers. Verse 20, there shall be no reward to the evil man. The candle of the wicked shall be put out. So what did Moses do? He chose to not live for the things of this world. He chose to not live for what he could have at Pharaoh's table. He chose suffering over the reward of the world. So it does check us. What is my attitude about life and the world itself? I want to move on because of the time that I have here. A caution regarding the authorities in your life. Two authorities in your life you should be concerned about in verse 21. And who are they? The Lord and the King. Now the King is representative of human authority, but we know from Romans chapter 13 that all human authority is delegated by God, right? So the authorities in our life are representative of God's authority. So let's look at this for a moment. My son, fear thou the Lord and the King. Now here's the question. If I fear the Lord more than any other, I probably am not going to be challenged by having a fear of the King, right? To respect is really to revere the King. So if I fear and revere the Lord and the King, and then going on, and meddle not with them that are given to change. And so here's in verse 21, there's two thoughts there. Who should I fear? All right, who should I fear? I should fear the Lord, and then I should fear in the sense of revering human authority. In this sense, the embodiment of that authority is the King. But the next part of that verse, verse 21, and Romans 13, I've already referred to that. The next part of verse 21, meddle not with them that are given to change. You ever worked with anyone that's moody? Somebody that, you don't know, do I tiptoe into the office? Do I walk into the office? Do I greet the person or do I avoid the person? Meddling with people that are given to change. Now let me walk you through it. So let's go straight through the verse here. It's on your outline there. My son, fear thou the Lord and the King. Revere the Lord, honor, revere the authorities that are in my life. Meddle not with them that are given to change. On your outline there, I gave you an idea of what it means to given to change. It means given to a disguise, double-minded, or someone that's disloyal. Put it in a different way, it's someone that lacks integrity. They lack integrity. You don't know if they're speaking the truth or if they're going to speak a lie. You have learned that you cannot trust them. I put in my notes here the note concerning leaders, unprincipled leaders given to change. Leaders who lack in integrity will generally come to a sudden, humiliating end. The latter part, their calamity shall rise suddenly, and who knoweth the ruin of them? If you watch people in life long enough, and they are particularly lacking in integrity, sooner or later, everybody's going to know it. They'll know it by their words, they'll know it by their attitudes, they'll know it by their actions. Sooner or later, you watch people long enough, they're going to reveal who they are. The one that you don't want to mess with is the one that is given to change. Now, why generally, if we're principled people of character, we should be predictable, right? We're principled people of character. People will know if he speaks, he's going to speak the truth. But if he's a liar, he might speak the truth and he might not speak the truth. I don't know if he's telling the truth or if he's not telling the truth. Why? Because he's given to change. So here's a question for us. What kind of people are we? Are you? Do you speak the truth? Do people in your life, your family members, do they know that when you're speaking that it's the truth? Or do they wonder? Do they have cause to fear you? Or do our children know we're predictable because we're principled? What do you think? Not or not. Don't want to mess with somebody you don't know where they're coming from. I felt a lot of that as I look at politics today. The woman that said that a man could be pregnant and should have the right to an abortion, is that somebody you would want to trust? If you can't trust her on that point, can you trust her on any point? And the answer is no. You know, we ought to bring that into our own lives as well. Let's go to the next part. 2 requisites for judges: wisdom and impartiality. Wisdom and impartiality. And so the verse reads this way then: judgment should be rendered without prejudice. And here we go. These things also belong to the wise-hearted, experienced. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. Here's a question. Do we live in a world that there are respecter of persons? Yes. Absolutely. Right? Somebody's always courting favor. Judgment should be rendered without prejudice. Now here's the problem we have today. We've become a victim society. And because somebody is a victim or somebody has been prejudiced against in the past, then they should get a free pass when it comes to law and justice, right? But that's where we're living now. We've set aside the rule of law, and we have become a lawless people. Let me add to that another thought. Unprincipled, unrighteous judge will be cursed. Will be cursed. Walk this through. He that saith unto the wicked, thou art righteous, shall the people curse. Nations shall abhor him. Are we living in a day that the righteous, or that the unrighteous, the wicked, are justified? Right? It's how you were raised. Bless your heart. Whatever you know, so we get to this justification that is based upon prejudice. You know, I know sometimes court cases are tried and somebody has a history of maybe they have committed rape in the past and some other crime. And then as the jury is up there weighing a new crime about that individual, the argument is, well, the jury doesn't have a right to know that he has a past. But it is his past that is a mirror or a reflection into who he is, his character. But then you remove the past, and now what is the basis of judgment? You don't know what the truth is. So an unprincipled, unrighteous judge will be cursed. So I submit to you, we're living in that day now. You know, it's a terrible, tragic day that we're living in. And corruption in all kinds of places. Let me go on. A righteous judge will be praised. A righteous judge will be praised. By the way, if there is a righteous judge, he'll be cursed by the wicked. He'll be hated by the world. Yeah, it's part of the culture we're living in. Proverbs 24, verse 26. Every man shall kiss his lips that giveth a right answer. Now, that's kind of a strange thought, isn't it? But the point of this verse is it's a point of affection. When somebody gives a right answer, you love them. That's the point of this. There ought to be love to speak the truth. You ever have anybody say, I want to ask your advice about something? And you know that when they're asking, they're hoping you're going to answer in a way that they agree. And I've actually had some that I've said, well, I'll answer the question, but I don't think you're going to like it. Right? And sure enough, they don't like it. Right? You know? So it's, again, the practicality of this as you begin going through it. So let me back it up and get a run at it. There's 2 requisites for judges. If you're going to sit in judgment, if you're going to make decisions, and as a father, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a grandfather, as a pastor, as a teacher, we're always making judgments. It's how we have to live that way. We've got to make decisions. And so we should have wisdom and impartiality. I have Kevin here. Kevin, in your class, if you are playing favorites, is that going to go over well with the rest of the class? No, they're going to grill him. You know, because they're looking, those kids, even if they're not perfect kids, they're still expecting him to be fair, impartial. You know, it's the world we live in. They can treat you in a bad way, but they want you to treat them in a fair way. So let's go back to this then. These things also belong to the wise. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. Now, how do we teach that to our kids? We should love. We should be a friend. We should make sure when we're making decisions that we're not prejudiced in the decisions that we're making, that we are viewed as fair and impartial. Then an unprincipled, unrighteous judge will be cursed. And so there's some in here that are employers, your bosses. And so people watch you. They're watching to see, do you have integrity? That's the ultimate question. Do you have integrity as you deal with people? Are you the same with that individual as you are with that individual? Or do you have principles that guide your decisions? And then back to the righteous judge will be praised. They will not always like what you say or what your opinion or your judgment is. But if they at least seen that you have principles behind the decisions, they might not give you a kiss of the lips, which probably we would want, but at least they'll love you and respect you. May not like your decision, but they should at least love and respect you. You can jump in anytime. I feel like I'm lecturing tonight. Don't mean to be. Here we go. Go to another thought then. Plan your work and work your plan. Kevin, I thought about you and I put the house blueprint up there, brother. Plan your work and work your plan. But in the Bible, usually when it's talking about building a house, it's really talking about building a home, right? There's a difference in a house and a home. The home is the family. So here's what the verse is teaching then. It's going to be dealing with the family. Now let's walk this out and see if what you think about it. All right, I'm going to submit to you that I think this is about personal and financial responsibility. So here we go. Proverbs 24, verse 27. Prepare thy work outside without. Make it for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. Now that is something that at first reading, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's back up a little bit. If we lived in Solomon's century, which would have been around 1000 BC, if we lived in that century, most people were making their living doing what? Agriculture, right? They were farming, all right? Livestock, sheep, ox, farming, plowing the field. So, put it back in an agricultural mindset then. Prepare thy work without. Make it fit for thyself in the field, farming. And afterwards build thine house. So here I'm going to walk it through for you and see what you think about that thought there. Let me get to my notes here. Here we go. All right. I believe this is what it's teaching. The preparatory steps for success in life, marriage, and family. And here I'm going to give you 3 thoughts with here. This, I don't believe it's on your outline. Number 1, prepare thy work without. Number 1, establish a livelihood. Establish a livelihood. Do you remember, some of you, if you can go far enough back in your mind, and maybe you were getting married and you were young, and a wise father would have asked you, as you were wanting to get married, what would they ask you? How are you going to take care of your family, right? You're marrying my daughter. How are you going to provide for my daughter, right? A livelihood. Now, we know that love can what? Blind, right? So why are you wanting to get married? Because I'm in love, okay? Are you ready to get married? Oh yeah, I'm ready to get married. Well, have you prepared? All right? So I'm suggesting to you, as you look at verse 27, It is the preparation, the livelihood. I wrote 3 thoughts down. We build our lives on a solid foundation and guiding principles. And so seek godly wisdom, seek counsel, pursue a livelihood or a career. If you're going to get married, you've got responsibilities, son, and you're going to have to be able to provide for your family.
I always felt it was important because my dad instilled it, I know it's biblical, instilled it in me that with 2 boys, make sure that you steer them in a way that they have a career to make a living for themselves. Because some kids come out of college with a degree in cross-cultural studies, you know, so that was really a goal of Janet and I, was really to steer the boys from early on into able to make a living.
There's all kinds of degrees that you think you're never going to make a living doing that.
Well, at Maranatha, we always joked that it was the degree in underwater basket weaving. Yeah. We use that as a placeholder for various things. Underwater basket weaving.
And yet they're wanting to get married. They got these high aspirations, you know. And reality is, a lot of us got married, weren't ready. We were not prepared. Here's the second thought I want to give you. Not only establish a livelihood, but be diligent in your labor. Make it for thyself in the field. You ever worked in a garden that had never been a garden before? One of the things that you come into, and my dad would switch to 3 different garden locations we had over the years. And when you're plowing up a brand new field, you never know what you're going to uncover. But one thing you could be sure of, and this is back home, not here in Florida with the sand, rocks. Rocks are forever coming up. It's like you get all the rocks out of the field, and there's more rocks, right? Maybe there were trees that have been planted in that field, and so you've got all the roots that are running through there. And so you have to prepare the field. So prepare thy work without. What's your work going to be? What's your livelihood going to be? Make it fit for thyself in the field. You got to prepare the field. One, son, how are you going to make a living? Number 2, how are you going to feed your family, right? And then thirdly, afterwards, build thine house. And I'm suggesting to you the word house there is really the idea of build your home. All right, so you want to get married, do you? Okay, what are you going to do to make a living? How are you going to, after you get your job and career, how are you going to establish yourself that you have substance and means? You know, let's go back to the agricultural setting. If we were raising a son and the son was going to have his own life, his own family, and I know they would live together some in those early years, but generally speaking, what would a son living on a family farm, what are some of the things that son would need to be doing? He would need to what? 1, work. He would need to provide a home, a place, and then finally he's ready to have a family. Do you remember with the groom and the scriptures, before he was betrothed, maybe it was for a year, he's betrothed to this woman that he wants to be his wife. But he spends a whole year, perhaps, getting ready for the wedding day. Well, what's he doing during that year? Well, he's building onto Dad and Mom's house. He's adding a room on there, and I know all that about, I'm not going to live with your mother, you know, all that stuff that can be going on. But there was that preparation that was there. So anyway, here one other thought, and then I'm going to move on. And this is just a passing thought here. We're living in a fast food, have it today, buy it on credit culture. All right? So young people coming up today, if we went our teenagers upstairs and all, their idea of their first car is probably not something that is a 15-year-old clunker that you're going to have to get out and work on. And, you know, their idea is to go and get the car at the same place you go and get your car, right? But there's a difference. You've worked 40 years to be able to buy that car. And the culture today, kids coming out of college and all, They're wanting everything that you as a parent have had. You've worked your whole life for it, but they've gotten accustomed to your lifestyle and they want to start where you are. And so they know nothing about preparing. They know nothing about managing their finances, for it fit thyself in the field. And they know nothing about building a life unless we teach them. All right? So that's what Solomon's doing. Going on to another thought then. A wise man buttons his lips and demonstrates discretion. And I will need to kind of speed up the tempo a little bit here. A wise man buttons his lips and demonstrates discretion. Here we go. The first thought then, be cautious before becoming entangled in another man's affairs or cause. Let's look at it here. Verse 28. Be not a witness, and the implication is a false witness. You'll see that in a moment. Be not a witness against thy neighbor, your associate, your companion, your friend, without a cause for no good reason. And deceive not with thy lips. So the implication of verse 28 is a false witness. Okay, that's what you've got going there. So the verse 28 again now. Be not a witness. Don't give a testimony. Don't give an opinion against thy neighbor without a good reason, without a good cause. And deceive not with thy lips. Now, why not? And I put in here the latter part, the implication of language. So here's the thought I want to give you, and it's about revenge. Verse 28, I believe, is about revenge, and it carries on into verse 29. So I'm going to back up. Be not a witness against thy neighbor without cause, and deceive not with thy lips. It's hard to bite your tongue, all right? It's even harder to keep your mouth shut. There's a time and there's a place that you speak. And man, it's something you almost have to learn at the school of the hard knocks. It really is, all right? Now, moving on then. Say not, I will do so to him as he hath done to me. It's revenge. I will render to the man according to his work. It goes back to the earlier part, when you see your enemy stumble, don't gloat, right? Well, we're back to that here as well. Now, here's a question for you. Why is it wrong to seek revenge? And here's the answer, because I don't have time to discuss it. It's wrong to seek revenge because it interferes with God's business. God's about vengeance. And if we'll step back, He'll deal with the problem. Now, lastly, here we go. In fact, I think we looked at this earlier, didn't we? Be positive much as lieth within you, the latter part, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. All right, let me go to the last one. All right, and these, we have verses 30 through 45, and I'm putting the question there, do you have a thorny heart? Now, here's the reason I'm giving you that. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Proverbs 24:30, I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. I grew up in the country. I can remember watching people, lazy as they could be, back out in the country in the old days, everybody had a porch, you know. And some people were always sleeping on their porch, you know. And I could name some names, but I think they're all dead, but who knows? I don't want to go there. All right, I'm going to show discretion. But the men that worked hard, I'm talking about the farmers and all, I mean, they would be sometimes out in the field in the middle of the day. They didn't know anything about a siesta. But there were other people that were lazy, and you could look at their fields and look at their house. The porch is falling in, the roof is leaking, weeds are growing up in the garden. It is a mess, right? Here is this guy. Now this is Solomon telling his son, son, I went by the field of a lazy sluggard, a slothful man, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And what did I see? Lo, it was grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof. The stone wall thereof was broken down. And then I saw, and I considered it well, and I looked upon it, and I received instruction. Here, what can you learn from a man that, let's say, living out, he has livestock and all, but he doesn't take care of his fence? What can you learn from that man? One, it's going to be a lot harder to gather those cows back up than it would have been to just repair the fence, right? That's one of the things you can learn. So the matter of the wall, let's just talk about that for a moment. The matter of the wall is a matter of maintenance, right? If I work and take care of the problem today, then I can keep it from being worse tomorrow. But if I don't deal with the problem today, I'm going to have a bigger problem tomorrow, right? So the sluggard says, back up, the slothful went by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. It's raining today. I'm not going to go out. It's a little bit too hot. You know the weather. I'm going to wait until it's a better day to be out and work in the field. Well, invariably, all you do is keep putting off the inevitable, right? Because things get worse. Have you ever seen a property that was just totally neglected? I mean, like people moved out and they left the home there. There's nobody living there. I've always been amazed at how fast nature takes over. I mean, before you know it, trees are growing up on the side of the house. It's breaking the foundation. The roof is starting to leak, and if you don't repair the leak, then the rafters inside, they begin to rot. And before you know it, you've got a pile of junk. It's just totally destroyed. I sometimes like watching these shows, what do they call it? The Finder guys, you know? Yeah, American Pickers, and they'll find this like 1920s something out in the middle of the woods, and trees are all grown up around it, and vines and all like that. And I'm always amazed, though. I know they're playing with us because they'll get a little bit of gas and put it in there. Next thing you know, they're starting it up. It's like, I know it doesn't work like that. You guys toyed around with that before you ever pulled it out of that hole. But the point is this, nature will take over, right? If you neglect something, it will not go well, all right? Moving on then. A little slumber, or a little sleep rather, and a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, and so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. I wanted to walk through all of these verses. I'm going to back up. And on your outline there, I've given you kind of the broader thought of this thorny heart, if you would. I went by the field of the sluggard, lazy man, and by the vineyard or the garden of the man who was void of understanding. He's not thinking ahead. He's not planning ahead. Verse 31. And lo it, his field, his garden, it was all grown over with thorns and nettles, and I put on there prickly weeds, had covered the face, or we could say even the ground thereof, and the stone thereof was broken down. And you know, eventually the tree roots will start pushing up the wall, and you know, the water is seeping in, and that wall just begins to disintegrate. Verse 32, then I saw, and I considered it well. I watched. You know, it's far better to learn by somebody else's experiences than learn by your own, right? Just watch somebody else, and they say, okay, that was foolish. That didn't work. I'm not gonna do that either, all right? So you learn. So Solomon says to his son, I watched and I learned. I saw and I considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. I watched, I learned, I'm the wiser for it. Then verse 33, yet a little brief sleep and a little bit slumber. You ever tempted to stay in bed and say, well, you know what, I'm just going to lie here another 15 minutes and then I'll get up. And the next thing you know is an hour has passed, right? So it's usually not a little slumber. A little slumber turns into a lot of sleep. All right, here we go. Yet a little slumber, a little sleep, a little folding of the hands. And by the way, I put in there the idea of self-love of the hands to sleep. And then verse 34, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, literally walk, march, become, and thy want as an armed man. The thought of verse 34, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And you and I, we've known people like this. You might have family that's like this. They're just lazy. My dad would say, too lazy to get out of bed, you know, too lazy to get out of bed.
My great uncle passed away a few months ago, but he was in his 80s working a 3,000-acre farm, and he would have people in their 20s come in and could not keep up with him at 80-something, and it was, well, I'm going to get up about 8 or 9 a.m., and it's like he's already been working for 4 or 5 hours,
Yeah.
and that's just how it was, and they just weren't able to keep up with him.
I know. And lived a lot longer and a lot healthier because of it. I think with, we mentioned Cece earlier, and she's 102. Well, she's closer to 103 than she is 102. She's been living on literally just a little bit of, able to swallow just a little bit of water. But she's lived all this time, and I'm amazed when I go by, but I'm also reminded she has always worked in her yard. I don't know if any of you remember way back when. Always worked in her yard. And so she was probably 98 when she stopped working in her yard, outside, you know. So my point is, she's a strong heart. Strong, you know, and I think there's a lot to go with genetics too, though, let's be honest. So my suggestion is Jerry needs to have an acre field and get out and work it to live a good, long life. Oh, my.
As long as it has a golf course.
Anyway, we'll close with that tonight, but I think as I look over this, there's so much of it that is practical, but maybe the most practical is the wise man buttons his lips and demonstrates discretion. It's a thing that's hard to learn. You'll know a man by his words, and be cautious before getting entangled, becoming entangled in another man's affairs. That goes back, I can think of so many applications. Money, boy, you know, borrowing money, bad things happen when you're doing that. Or somebody asking you a question, taking what you said, twisting it, and then turning it into something else. So you gotta be careful. Gotta have discretion, and then revenge is a bitter, poisonous pill. It really is a wise thing to get out of the way and let God deal with problems. I believe a lot of believers, we fall into that. We end up with great anxieties because we just won't let go of things and just say, you know what, God, I'm going to let you handle this because it's not going to be good if I do it. You know, I think I commented recently in church, one of the hardest things in life sometimes to learn with family and all is to not be the Holy Spirit. Because it never goes well when you decide you're going to be that. Anybody? Any other comments? Anyone? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things you mentioned on the wise man working his lips part, I think a lot of times the reason that I use we, so I don't say I, it feels terrible. The reason that we interrupt and add things to, or gotta say my piece or whatever, is because we believe that we're right, as opposed to knowing that God is right. And so whenever we bring ourselves into the situation and we're replacing God in his position in the situation, and we lack trust in God,
Yeah.
and that's why we get involved, that's why we take up a side, that's why we open our mouth, that's why we do revenge, because we're not patient enough for God to get his just and
All right.
righteous punishment, etc.
Yeah. You know, another thing that's hard to learn is, and the staff and I were discussing this yesterday, generally when people aren't asking your counsel, it's because they don't want your counsel. You know, you think about that. Now, when it comes to our children, we have to be proactive, right? We have to be on the front end instructing and teaching and directing, because we're the ones, being Solomon's part, we're trying to tell our children, you know, and that's one of the things I want to do with this ultimately, is that it can be simple sound bits of, I guess I would say almost a modern English application. Don't gloat, you know, don't gloat. simple things like that I think we need to learn. And but also we need to instruct our children to, seek wise counsel. Don't be lazy. You have to work hard in life, before you get married, and how are you going to provide? Practical things that your family, your dad would have sat you down and talked you through. This generation does not do that. They don't do that. And so, you can have kids growing up in elementary school, and I've had parents say, well, I'm going to let them make their decision. They don't have enough wisdom to make decisions like that, And that's why I think I said Sunday morning, abdicating responsibility. Nothing good's going to come when we don't bear responsibility for our God-given role that we have, whether it's as a pastor, it's as an employer. You've got God-given roles that you have to carry out and follow principles as you do so. Anyone else? Well, let's pray. Father, thank you for truth, and I pray that we've been the wiser because of it. Maybe some of us need to go home and repair the leaking faucet, because it's not going to repair itself, or somebody else needs to go home and change the oil, and things in life that if we neglect doing what needs to be done, we are invariably going to regret it. And so, Lord, I pray whether it's in our personal relationships or it's in something practical like a garden or an automobile, or whatever it might be, that we would be known for being wise because we've heeded good counsel. Thank you then for truths that though times change, your word does not. In Christ's name, amen. God bless.
Preacher, so just a funny picture.
Sure.
And here's a blue car with a gray fender, and it's written identified as blue.
I've seen some automobiles around here like that. Two different colored doors, different. That's not a car that I want to buy.
Last week I sent my cousin over in Lakewood a card saying that I was thinking about him and all.
Yeah.
I got an email back from him yesterday. He's in the State of Carpenters Retirement Center over there.
Oh.
And a lady there that they've met